was my goal to earn as much income as I can and, like have savings and buy property and that kind of stuff. And so maybe that's one path. Or is my goal more like what I do on my day-to-day life has to feed my soul and I need to feel happy about what I'm doing and I eventually that was more what I realized I wanted to do.
We live in a time that holding down one job title for a whole career is not possible anymore. At some point of our journey, we can expect a career reinvention is going to happen. So how do we embrace that? What does it take for us to navigate a career reinvention mindfully and sometimes even proactively? On this season of the Everyday Talent Podcast, we are talking about Tales of Reinvention. Tune in as we dive into this topic with fellow creatives and experts. Welcome to the Everyday Talent Podcast. This is your go-to podcast for the most honest look into all things creative career related. I'm your host, Betty. I'm a creative, a nonprofit consultant, and a career and business coach for creative people just like you. Hey, how is everyone doing? We're back with another episode on this new season on the Everyday Talent Podcast, all about Tales of Reinvention. On today's episode, we're going to hear about a story about how hitting a dead end with a seemingly stable job propels one to embrace one's true passion and develop an independent art practice. I'm talking to Puerto Rican-Canadian multidisciplinary artist Cristal Buemi. Cristal is now known for her work in stop-motion animation, video art, photography, collage, and digital design. Her collaborative and individual works have been exhibited worldwide, including Animac, Harbourfront Center's Co-Motion Festival, Fashion Art Toronto, and broadcasted on AMC and HBO. But what most people don't know is that before running her independent practice, she had an early start in broadcast TV. Fresh out of college, she landed a job quickly in TV and was working day and night. How did she hit a point of no return with that career? What gave her the courage to leave her full-time job with benefits and pursue her craft in stop-motion animation? We will hear all about those today on the episode. Without further ado, here is the conversation with Cristal. Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Talent Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to talk to Cristal. Welcome, Cristal.
Hi, Betty. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast. Cristal, you do many different things. You're a multidisciplinary artist. Can you tell the audience a bit about what you do?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Cristal Buemi. My pronouns are she and her. And as Betty says, I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and that takes many forms. But my main focus is stop motion animation. I also work in like art departments for film and TV, and I do like video art and projection work. And I'm also an art educator.
Amazing. There seems to be a lot to unpack there already in that intro of what you do. But, just for background information for the audience, Cristal and I were recently on a panel together at TIFF. And before the panel, I got to chat with Cristal and I discovered this whole other side about her career beginning. And you didn't really start it out in animation. So it sparked my interest to invite you on a podcast to talk about that kind of reinvention or transition, rather. Can you tell people what was your first career?
Yeah, sure. So I went to Toronto Metropolitan University in hopes to get into like TV studio work and journalism. I really wanted to be like on the red carpets interviewing the latest stars. But then after my first year, we were introduced to a bunch of different streams and we were introduced to digital media. And that's where I learned about animation and that's where I learned about motion graphics and graphic design. And so kind of in that moment, I was still really curious about the idea of live TV and like a studio environment, but I was a bit more interested in the behind the scenes creative work as opposed to maybe being in front of the camera. So that instantly kind of changed after my first year. And then I
Mm,
focused in working kind of in graphics in a live studio and more film environment. So when I graduated, that's like the type of work that I got into. So I was actually working in sports broadcasting, in business
mhm.
news, which is like, 12 hours of live TV every day, and it's constantly changing. So there's like this really amazing fast pace quality about it that really gets you to think like quickly on your toes. You have like 30 seconds to change like a graphic or something because the score has changed or something has happened in the market. So it gave me a lot of really incredible skills in that sense. But I noticed working there in that environment for a few years that it wasn't really about quality of work. It was about quantity of work because, again, like you're just producing and producing work all day long for 12 hours a day. And so quickly I realized, like, I think I'm more of an artist that likes to focus more about the quality of the work that I'm putting out there as opposed to just getting information out there. So that was one of the first realizations where I was like, I'm not sure if this is actually for me.
I
Um,
heard lots of things there. One that you were aware of your interests, and that like the interest in graphics and animations is not like unfounded in your journey, right? Like you
yeah.
quickly realize that even in the broadcast journalism degree. So and then you sort of like reinforced that or validated that as you were working in a industry that might not necessarily like value that, like she said, the quality of the graphics work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so I had in university, I had taken a couple classes and stop motion was kind of briefly introduced. So I was slowly kind of teased with the idea of what stop motion was and what the possibilities were. So I was doing it kind of on the side on my own time. And that was feeding my creative soul for a while. I was kind of holding things together while I was doing my day job. And I think one thing that really kind of distracted me from maybe getting into more of my passion earlier was that I was quite successful in getting work right away. And I ended up getting like
Mm,
a full-time salary benefits pension job with Bell Media working for the Business News Network. So I was like 22 at the time, 23, and getting this type of job pretty quickly into my career was like really exciting. And so I think that held me in the position for a lot longer than maybe I wanted to be. And because I
mhm,
was able to find this kind of hobby of stop motion and animation creative work outside, I was trying to find this right balance. So I think
mhm,
that's why I was able to stay a bit longer. But I think that, you quickly have to decide in your career, like, do I want to, what is my goal? Is my goal to earn as much income as I can and, like have savings and buy property and that kind of stuff. And so maybe that's one path. Or is my goal more like what I do on my day-to-day life has to feed my soul and I need to feel happy about what I'm doing and I eventually that was more what I realized I wanted to do. So in a very young age having to decide that. It was complicated, but actually what happened, why I ended up making the switch or why I started thinking like maybe this isn't for me was, and this is another thing I kind of want to talk briefly about, artists kind of, breaking into whatever industry you're working in, is that companies usually take advantage of your kind of eagerness. So when I stepped into this kind of full-time salary job, I wasn't aware that before me, the art kind of graphic department was 4 people and they let go of everyone and then just hired me. So I was doing the amount of work of 4 people,
whoa, for people.
12
Hmm.
hours a day. And after about a year and a half, 2 years of study of that work, I ended up getting like a repetitive strain injury because there also the desk wasn't set up ergonomically for me and I wasn't
Yeah.
embracing like, this is maybe too much work for me. Like I didn't have those skills yet to really like be
Hmm.
like, oh, is this right? Is this normal?
Hmm.
So that is really what like brought me to a bit of a crossroads in my career at a pretty young age.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the the path that you are on. I'm just visualizing like you at that young age coming, fresh out of college, and you got a job, and by all, like I'm imagining that, like, you are like, well, I should be grateful for this job, but then it's
Exactly.
also like you're feeling that misalignment, and also realizing that you're being like taken advantage of in the job.
Yeah, so it's a lot. It's a lot to, I remember feeling like equally proud of myself for landing, what seemed like this dream job, but at the same time I was like, but my body hurts and they're not listening to my needs and I don't feel supported and so it's like this balance at such a young age to try and figure out and navigate was very challenging. But as soon as I got this injury, that was a huge kind of wake up call for me to be like, I'm just starting my career and I already have, mistreated my body and not stood up for my rights and not, you know, like yeah, I guess like stood up for my rights in the sense of like, hey, this is not the right equipment. Like I was using a mouse, not even like a Cintiq pen, and it was an
Whoa.
size mouse. So it wasn't even like the right size mouse for my hand. I was in this little kind of closet of an office. There was no windows. Like it was a very interesting setup. And again, like at that time you feel like, oh, I'm making good money though, and I'm
Yeah.
already set up
Yeah.
for life, basically. Like,
Yeah. You got
but
benefits. Yeah. Hmm.
exactly, which you never, I basically writ off that I was going to get benefits as an artist. So it was a very conflicting time. But as soon as your body is in pain, and I ended up finding out that that caused like now I have chronic pain from that time in my life. So you have to
Mm.
take those signs seriously, and it was a huge wake up call for me, honestly.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you had a wake up call, and
Hmm.
I want you to take us to the day that you quit the job, essentially.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
the moment of deciding that, I'm sure is still difficult, or I assume that it's difficult. Tell us, like, when you quit the job, how did you feel as you look towards the future?
Yeah, so one actually positive thing that came out of that experience was I was part of a union at the time, and I
Mm-hmm.
actually had to go on like a disability leave because my job was like the direct cause of my injury. And without taking a break, I was not going to recover basically. And so I had time to reflect on, okay, do I want to go back to this job? And it was also bigger than the job at that point because it was like, okay, not only maybe this job isn't working, but in general, can I do a job where I'm sitting at a desk for 8+ hours a day without a lot of breaks, doing graphics where I'm clicking and doing the same motions? Like, can my body handle that? And also, do I want to do that? So that time gave me a bit of space to really dive into, like take away the surface of like being in pain and stuff like that, but like what does this mean more for the long term, and like do I really want to kind of restart a career I just kind of landed? And so after about a year of being off and going through therapy and all of these things, I did decide to kind of reroute.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been doing stop motion animation kind of behind the scenes throughout all of this time. It was the one creative outlet that really like held my sanity together. And so I was like, look, like at this point, I've had the experience of doing the job where I make the money and this is the outcome. And I'm not happy. And now I'm in pain. Like now I have this issue I'm going to have to deal with my whole life. So might as
Yeah.
well do the thing that makes me happy and see what I can do with that. So that was kind of
Mm-hmm.
like the switch where I was
It's
like,
funny how much creativity comes out when we hit the rock bottom.
honestly, yeah, I was making some great work, some really fun music videos. I was really collaborating with friends. So that really helped. And so I decided at that point, like, okay, I gave this a shot and this is what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
If I really wanted to come back to it, I feel like I probably could. So I'm still young. Let's take advantage of this time and this knowledge that I now have, and try something different. So I ended up emailing HR because I was on long-term disability, and I just said like, I don't think that this is the right fit for me. My concern is like if I came back to the exact same position, I would just be, damaging my body further. And I didn't feel like my needs were being met. So that was it. And because I had gone through this for, over a year and a half, this whole experience, HR was actually, there was like a woman at HR that was actually quite like knowledgeable about my experience, and she was quite supportive, and she was like, you know what, this is probably like, she kind of set it to the side, like this is probably the
Hmm.
best decision you can make for yourself. Like, we're sorry to see you go, but
Hey,
this
that's
makes
a good HR person.
honestly, I was like, thank you
Yeah.
so much. But it really like reaffirmed that, yeah, this is the right move, even though it's terrifying.
Hmm.
This is the right move. So I actually never went back physically to my space. It was all through email. And so that actually helped a lot that I didn't have to go back and after a year being off and quit, like that would have been so uncomfortable. So that was kind of how I decided, but I felt that I lacked a little bit of skill if I really wanted to get into more of a artistic expression with animation, which stop
Mm.
motion definitely is. Or there's like this tactility and handmade approach to it. And I never went to like a fine arts background or anything like that. Like all
Mm.
my background was technical. So I was like, I
Mm.
think this is a good opportunity to maybe go back to school. So
Mm.
that's
Hmm.
that's where I decided to look for like a more immersive master's program in animation. So that's kind of how that path went. So I quit and then I applied to a school in Barcelona because it was the perfect program. It was like specifically in animation. It was a year. It was very intense, but it was, I didn't have to go back for 3 or 4 more years of schooling because I just wanted to I had this passion, this fire in me to
Yeah.
switch. And so I wanted to keep that momentum going.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Was there
Yeah.
any self-doubt when you were in Barcelona in the middle of the program?
Actually, no. So I
Mm.
think that, so I had been to Spain before, right after I graduated university, right before I got into all of the sports and everything. I took like about 4 or 5 months off and I did an artist residency in this little countryside just outside of Barcelona. And
Hmm.
when I landed in Spain, it had been one of the first times since I came to Toronto where I felt like, oh, this is an environment in which I feel like is made for my creative expression. So I think that was also why going back to school in
Yeah.
Spain helped that feel more confident because I already had that kind of connection to the space.
Hmm.
And yeah, there was no doubt that it was the right or wrong. Like I knew it was the right choice. And that year flew like it was the best year of my life, to be honest. So it was like this incredible, going from a really low period to instantly
Hmm.
like, nope, this is the right path.
There's so much freedom that I hear in that. Like once you like make the decision to quit, well,
Yeah.
after your leave and quit, just ignited all this fire from you.
Yeah. Yeah, because I had like a year where I was kind of like depressed and, I physically couldn't do as much as I normally could at a very young age. And I had a lot of time to think and to write. And I think that if I didn't have that year, maybe there would be a bit of lingering doubt. But once I quit and once I got accepted into my program and once I went, like I knew that was like the right path for me. So
Hmm.
mhm.
Yeah, feels like a full body yes, like you're in, like you knew. Well,
Yeah.
there's no going back either because you knew how much damage that has done for you. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So maybe that also helps like the confidence because you're like, well, I'm not going back, so I can only move
Mhm.
forward. So even if this doesn't work, this is still the right move versus going back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
what happened after you graduated? You got
Yeah.
the skills, you build your expertise, and how did you establish yourself to where you are now?
Yeah. So as part of my master's, I had to do like a dissertation and it was a part of a film. And that film actually was very successful in like the film festival circuit. So I was able to kind of travel with that film for almost a year after I was graduated. So that was a really wonderful experience for me to just see like what this kind of independent animation, industry looks like. Is there work out there? What types of jobs are out there? So that was almost like a little research period in my life where I could see like what was possible. And I also think because I had a background in like TV and film production, I knew that even though it was a step in a different direction, it wasn't completely out of left field. Like all of the things that I took from my previous career, I could still apply a lot of those skills and a lot of, there's some networking that was kind of overlapping. So I wasn't starting completely at zero, which helped.
Hmm.
But during this year, I was kind of going back and forth, traveling a lot. I was still based out of Spain, and a friend of mine owned this little art after school, kind of like art school for kids. And she was like, "Well, now that you have this fancy master's program, like, why don't you come and do some classes with the kids?" And I had never considered teaching. Like, it wasn't something that I ever thought I could do. But I always really loved like presenting and sharing skills and community. So I was like, yeah, like this kind of makes sense. So I ended up doing that and I
Mm-hmm.
loved it. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
so fun to share my passion in stop motion with kids. Like it was so, so fun. So that's kind of how the art education aspect started. So then after my film festival kind of year and moving back to Toronto, I ended up being like, okay, like maybe teaching could be a way that I can start paying the bills and start establishing myself while I figure out kind of the more creative aspect of my career. So that's what I did. So I started reaching out to, I started doing like a few little commercial jobs here and there. And through that, I would meet other stop motion animators because there's not a lot of us. So it's a small community. And so, you kind of meet one person and then they know like groups and they know
Mm-hmm.
people. And my first commercial, I met one of my good friends now, and he was telling me about TASTE, which is the Toronto Animated Image Society. And I was like, what is this? Is a whole community of animators? Like I need to meet them. So
Mm-hmm.
about 4 or 5 months after being back, I went to TASTE. And that's where my relationship with who I still collaborate with, I still teach with, that's where kind of it really worked and started working more with like community, working with older demographic as well. Like it wasn't just kids. And I was working with high school, some adults, workshops. So that really helped me expand and also just meet a lot of the animation community.
What I hear there is that like once you switch to like kind of working independently, it also opens up different streams. Like you had interest in teaching, in
Mm,
community work, and creating creating the art itself, and then
mm,
you were able to kind of pursue all those different leads and be very aware that like perhaps those like doing a set of different stuff can like widen
yeah.
the stability or the diversity of your portfolio. Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember when I was in university in my last year, one of my professors that I was quite close with who taught animation and digital media. And I was like, oh God, like I don't know what career, like what I really want to do. Like I have an
Yeah.
idea of what I want to get into, but I'm not sure. And, she'd exposed me to stop motion. I was like, can I actually make a career of this? Like I was very doubtful before I graduated. And she was like, Crystal, you're probably going to do a job that doesn't exist right now. Like you're probably going to make your own path. And that really, like, first of all, that she saw that I had maybe that ability, because not everyone has that energy and that strength to kind of build a career. But the fact that maybe I didn't have to like conform to fit into a career that already existed was so liberating to me. And so I've really like held on to that guidance. And I think that also really helps me be like, yeah, like you said, like when I came back, I was like, wow, there's all of these different avenues that are related to different skills I have, all within kind of animation, but in different ways. And so, it's kind of nice that maybe I don't have to necessarily, I was ready to get like a bartending job or something if I had to. But I was like, maybe there's a way that I don't have to do that and I can still be in this creative outlet, but in different ways. So I don't also feel burnt out because I know sometimes when do what you love as a profession, then when you want to work on your own personal work, you might not have the same energy for it. So I was also a bit fearful of that. So this was like the right balance, or it seemed like the right balance at the time. Mhm.
Wow, I'm like so touched your prof told you that. Like I was just thinking about that the other day, like how many jobs like or how many cool things that creative people do now are not imaginable in like the job title kind of sense.
Mm.
And to like have that like kind of grounding mantra,
Yeah.
it's really
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah, no, honestly, it kind of changed my whole outlook on how I was going to approach work. And it was funny because, now we know, obviously, after I graduated, I landed a more typical full-time type of position. And I was like, but maybe in my heart of hearts, I knew it never was actually the right fit. And so maybe that's why I also felt so confident because I was like, well, no, like I do think I was destined to do a multiplicity of work.
Hmm. So tell us now, like in your day to day, what are the set of different things that you do?
Yeah.
Uh, and how
Yeah.
do you manage all those things? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I make fun that I'm kind of like a full kind of production studio setup. So I do my administration, I'm my own kind of receptionist and I do all my calendar organization, but I also do the actual work and I do post production and all that kind of stuff. So definitely it changes depending on the time of the year. I'm very fortunate now that I have more kind of steady work working at OCAD University. So kind of, from September until the end of April or kind of beginning of May, I have classes that I teach. So that helps add a little bit of structure. Like I know Mondays and Wednesdays, like I have, class. And then that allows me to kind of be like, okay, but I have all these other days that are, and I can start to kind of schedule myself and allocate. So, my weeks are divided between teaching at OCAD. I also have some kind of more independent kind of community workshops or programs that I also run. Some of them are
Mm-hmm.
online, some of them are in person or like a hybrid approach. I also have Frame by Frame, which is my little
Yes.
collective with my colleagues Kyla and Ram. And that's done like very much so on our own time because we all have very different schedules. But that's another great way that I've been able to really get into like the grant world and learn more about that and how to expand community. And then I have kind of the industry part of my career which is a little less. Like I definitely over the years have had to kind of sacrifice a little bit because there's just so many hours in a day. And when you do have more of a structured like Mondays and Wednesdays, for example, that can
Mm-hmm.
sometimes conflict with like a random project that might come up. But whenever I can do industry related work, so whether it's a client that's emailing me and something I can do on my own time from home, or if it's something based in a studio, maybe that week I do the class online so I can like actually make it to that project. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's also kind of split with my own personal practice. So, applying to kind of programming and grants. Like I just had this kind of Young and Dundas exhibit.
Yes, Crystal, as we are recording, you have an exhibition at Young and Dundas with other amazing artists there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of those are kind of like the different facets. Like I say, it's kind of divided into three sections. There's like the art education, which is like OCAD, but then there's like all the community, and then there's like the industry work, and then there's like the personal practice work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that there's like a balance between predictability and variability. Like something
Mhm.
that is like, okay, the teaching is there. And on top of that, I have like my freedom to design my other, like how I feel about other days.
Absolutely.
How do you know when you are out of balance? This is actually a question that I got asked yesterday when I was doing an IG live. Like, how do you know as a independent artist when you are too much or too little or just out of balance in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, well, too much is a little bit more kind of obvious to feel because you just
Mm-hmm.
feel the stress where like there are days where like I get up at like 5 a.m. and I work from like 6 until 9 p.m., 10 p.m. at night. Those are maybe times where I'm like, this is a lot. Like I don't have a lot of breaks. I love everything I'm doing, and at least I'm doing different things. Like I'm not just sitting at a desk for that long because I just physically could not. But that's usually where I'm like, okay, I haven't like my mom makes fun of me because usually I have like a bun in my hair, and she knows that that's like crazy, crazy time
Mm-hmm.
because I don't even have enough time to really like even really comb my hair. So that's usually a sign where
A
I'm like,
physical sign.
yeah,
Yeah.
where I'm like, oh gosh, like I have my mom's always like, okay, is the bun in? And I'm like, yes. And she knows, like, okay, well, like, call me when you're free. Like, I know. But I also know that those really crazy times are not permanent. So
Mm.
a lot of that time, I'm a little bit like, kind of sacrificing a little bit of like my personal life and that kind of stuff because I know like this is only going to be for 2 or 3 months. Like after this period, like it's going to slow down. So I've learned
Right.
to kind of embrace that. And then on the opposite of the like, it's not balanced, right? I don't have a lot, or I find myself like looking at my calendar a lot more than usual because if it's
Mm.
scheduled work, I kind of know like things are good. I have little alerts. I don't have to look at it as much. But when I don't have a lot of work, I find myself like on my computer here, like looking at my calendar, being like, okay, like what can I fit and what can I do? So that's usually a bit of a tell where I'm like, oh, I think I'm like a bit underworked right now. And that does definitely happen. Like it
Hmm.
actually it came up in the panel that we were talking about this like ebbs
Yes.
and flows of it. And that is what it is, right? That, a lot of it has to do with like grant funding. And literally you
Hmm.
apply for a grant and you won't know until another 4 or 5 months from now. So there's just not much you can do with that project right now. Or, for school, for example, like there's structured semesters. So some parts of the semester are going to be really busy. When the semester's done, it's not going to be as busy. So learning to not take that time like personally and
Hmm.
maybe invest in yourself, especially during the times that we're busy, you could not, then that's kind of
Mm.
what I've been trying to do more so now. Because before, when I was really starting this career path, I would get quite depressed in those because it's quite a like disorientating feeling when you're like
Yes.
go 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 go, and all of a sudden you're like, oh gosh, I don't have anything actually to do today. Like you're like, what do I do with myself? And I would get a bit depressed because as like a bit of a hustling artist, your kind of association with productivity and everything is so closely related to work that it's
Hmm.
hard to actually identify that in other ways. So I've had an opportunity now of doing this for many years where I'm like, well, no, like this downtime, I need to take advantage of it in other ways. So doing all that, doing the yoga and working out and washing my hair, taking my hair out of the bun and yeah, and connecting with friends, doing personal work. Like I've really gotten into like, okay, this is the time to do it. So I don't view it now as such a like low time. I actually view it as like me time, which is lovely.
Yeah. Well, I hear that it took a couple cycles of that ebbs and flows and seasonality for you to build that
Yeah.
awareness. Because,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're just like the first time experience that low down season, it's like it's also normal that you feel like what's going on, what is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you've experienced it, but it's like almost destabilizing because you're so used to having like every minute of your day basically full. And I'm
Hmm.
someone that like really like I think I have more energy when I'm that busy. Like I really thrive in that type of environment. So then when it's the opposite, I'm just like, oh gosh, like it's really destabilizing.
What
So
do I do with myself? Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So to those who are basically the crystals, young crystals out there,
Yes.
who are probably on one path of their career and like deep down in their heart are like, I don't know whether this is for me. I have some other interest that I want to potentially transition to and explore a new possibility. What
Yeah.
would your advice for them be?
Yeah. So I definitely want to say that community is extremely important in this type of career. Whereas, like, maybe if you're working in a full-time benefits type of job, it feels sometimes more independent because everything's kind of figured out. But when you're in this type of career path, nothing is figured out. You get to figure everything out, which can feel overwhelming, but is also quite exciting if you try and like look at it that way. But I really truly don't think I would be where I am today if it wasn't for the different communities that I'm now like a part of. So, whether it's my taste community, whether it's frame by frame the community I'm making, I'm Puerto Rican, and so finding like Latin kind of artistic communities as well has been really fantastic. I found some really great collaborations. So I think finding your community is like the first thing I would say because it's like the best form of networking and the most heartfelt form of networking because it's people you actually genuinely respect and care about and want to work with. And B, you need support. Like when you're in those low moments and you're just figuring it out, if you're completely by yourself doing that, like it's going to be really challenging. So just having that support system within your community of people who understand what you're going through is, invaluable. So that would probably be my
Hmm.
first piece of advice. And then
Hmm.
also to just make sure that you're good, like you as a person are good. So whether that means your rent is paid and you don't have to worry about that, whether that means, like whatever you need for yourself, like finding little pockets of time in your day where you're like going for a walk or reading a little bit or meditating or whatever it is you need to be okay, making sure that you don't lose those times. So even when I'm in the bun phase of my year, I really, really try to still find like, when I wake up, before I even look at my email, I try and like read a little chapter of a book that inspires me or do a little meditation or go for a walk. Like those things are so important to feed you to then continue to hustle in this type of career. So I think those two things are like the biggest things I would like definitely advise. And just being flexible, being able to be
Yeah.
flexible and open, because you just never know. You never know what is going to lead into something that you didn't even dream of was possible for yourself. So being open and flexible to the possibilities is huge, and I think something I hope to carry like my whole life.
Yeah, that's amazing. To your point about community, it's about finding a community, but you're also creating a community. I just want to highlight that. That's incredible. Like, and realizing, I think the power of like having people to support you
Yeah,
also enable us to realize how important to create those space for others. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
All right. So, Crystal, if people were to find you and connect with you and want to check out your work, where should they go?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a website. It's just my first and last name, cristalbuemi.com. And that's where all of my kind of previous work lives. If I have a page, or if you want to contact me to do workshops, for example, you can contact me through there. And there's examples of that. But then also, I think like my Instagram is probably the best, because that one I keep a little bit more updated than the website. And that one also shows like if there's events coming up or an exhibit or a screening or something. And my Instagram is Cristal, Cristal, clear underscore.
Amazing. We'll put all those links in the show notes so that everybody can find you and connect with you.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this conversation today, Crystal. I think your journey really like it's not just for people who are looking into get into animation. It really is for anybody who are kind of thinking about reinvention or transition, that like what it takes, and also maybe a little lesson of like, okay, sometimes even for those of us who feel like, oh, we're in a like downward spiral or rock bottom, there's hope down the tunnel.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, thank you for saying that. I definitely hope that people feel that way after this, because I know those low moments are quite low. And so
Hmm.
knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and you will be okay, yeah, it helps.
Yeah. Did you enjoy this conversation with Crystal? My heart literally skipped a beat when she shared that her professor had encouraged her to pursue a career that does not exist yet. We all need to hear that. I wish that I heard that earlier in my career. As the 22-year-old me who had no idea I would be doing film consulting and coaching one day, I really think that that kind of encouragement is needed, as we are all carving our own paths and potentially reinventing and reinventing paths that don't exist. If you are someone out there wondering if your dream is possible, this is your sign. You are capable of carving out your unique path and do a combination of things that you didn't know could be put together. Thank you for tuning in today on the podcast. If you have not, I encourage you to follow the Everyday Talent Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other platforms of your choice. And if you've been following the podcast for a while, I also encourage you to share this episode with your friend or leave a comment on Apple Podcasts. This way, we get to amplify the voices on this podcast and make more creators out there to be seen. If you're looking for support on your journey of career reinvention, my one-on-one signature coaching program is open and you can book a free consultation call. I coach creators of all disciplines to make transitions or define more clarity in their independent practice. May we all carve our path that allows us to thrive in our own terms. See you next time.